Think nature does not build things this large without a price. The American lion was a 1,100-pound evolutionary debt that the Pleistocene had to collect. Most people hear American lion and see a bigger version of what stalks the African savanna. A scaled-up house cat. A beefier predator with the same playbook, the same instincts, the same limitations. They are wrong. This was not a lion. Not a subspecies. Not a regional variant bred thick by cold weather. This was Panthera atrox, a name that translates, without poetry or softening, to the cruel panther. A species isolated when the ice sheet sealed the border between continents and forced evolution to start over from scratch. What emerged on the other side was something the cat family had never produced before. And has never produced since. 523 kilograms. 1,153 pounds. The weight of 8 adult humans compressed into a single chassis of bone, tendon, and fast-twitch muscle fiber. Twice the length of a grown man, shoulder to haunch. Heavier than a polar bear, but built not to endure, built to chase, to corner, to kill with mechanical efficiency. And here is where the story fractures into something stranger. In the Brea Tar Pits of modern-day Los Angeles, paleontologists have pulled out the bones of over 4,000 dire wolves. Hundreds of Smilodon, the so-called saber-toothed cat. These predators smelled dying prey trapped in the asphalt and charged in. They did not think. They reacted. And the tar swallowed them whole. The American lion is absent from those pits. Thousands of wolves. Hundreds of saber-tooths. And the cruel panther, the largest, most powerful predator in the entire ecosystem, chose not to go. It looked at the same trap, smelled the same bait, and walked away. So how did a creature intelligent enough to read a death trap that fooled every other apex predator on the continent end up as a pile of bones in a human garbage heap? That answer will take time. But first, you need to understand what this organism was carrying inside its skull. Because the weight was not even the weapon. The weapon was hidden inside a cranial architecture engineered to do something no living feline can. 1,800 pounds per square inch. That is the force the American lion's jaw delivered at full clamp. Not an estimate. Not a projection from tooth size. A biomechanical calculation drawn from skull geometry, muscle attachment scarring, and the reinforced zygomatic arches, skeletal buttresses that framed its face like the load-bearing walls of a cathedral built for war. A modern African lion bites at 650 psi. The cruel panther tripled that. The Smilodon, that famous fanged icon of the Ice Age, generated 300 psi. The American lion struck 6 times harder. The skull was not a container for the brain. It was a weapons platform. A reinforced titanium-like cage of bone designed to focus 1,800 pounds of pressure into 4 carbon steel hardpoints, the canines. Each one 4 inches long. Each one thick enough to resist lateral shearing. These were not the fragile stilettos of the saber-tooth, prone to snapping on bone. These were hydraulic shears built to punch through hide, muscle, and vertebrae in a single closing motion. The jaw muscles anchored to a sagittal crest, a ridge of bone running along the top of the skull like the spine of an industrial press. The deeper that ridge, the more muscle. The more muscle, the more force per square centimeter channeled into those 4 points. No living cat possesses this ratio. No living cat comes close. But raw power without intelligence is just a bomb. A thing that detonates and destroys without strategy, without selection, without patience. What made the cruel panther something worse than a bomb was that it could think. You walk into a Pleistocene blizzard and you see white. A wall of nothing. Snow erasing the horizon, erasing distance, erasing the distinction between ground and sky. The cruel panther saw through it. Its visual system was tuned for low light detection at a level modern felines can approximate but never match. Specialized rod-dense retinas, biological photon traps packed tighter than pixels on a military sensor array, captured light that human eyes would never register, rendering the frozen steppe in gradients of thermal contrast. The heat signature of a mammoth pulsing through a whiteout the way a furnace glows behind fog. And while you heard nothing but wind, its auditory architecture was scanning a different frequency. Low-frequency sound, the kind that travels through frozen ground, through rock, through the dense atmosphere of a glacial world, registered across a detection range of 1.6 kilometers. A mile of passive sonar, running without pause, mapping the movement of herds you would never know existed. This was not a predator that stumbled into prey. This was a surveillance engine, a multispectrum detection platform wrapped in fur and muscle, processing environmental data across channels the human sensorium cannot access. And we have proof. In 1979, a gold miner in Alaska uncovered the carcass of a steppe bison frozen for over 36,000 years. They named it Blue Babe. Its hide was still intact. And pressed into that hide, preserved in permafrost like evidence in a seal vault, were bite marks. Spaced with a precision that matched one predator and one predator alone, the dental architecture of Panthera atrox. A crime scene older than civilization. A kill recorded in frozen flesh, waiting 10,000 centuries for someone to read it. Pull back from those tooth impressions, each one a few centimeters across, and consider the territory this predator commanded, because the frozen steppe it hunted was not a forest with borders or a valley with walls, it was a treeless, featureless, wind-scoured emptiness stretching hundreds of square miles to horizons that curved with the planet itself, a void of whitened silence where prey could be anywhere and cover existed nowhere, and the cruel panther did not patrol this land, it read it, the way a general reads a battlefield before a single order is given. And the physics of what happened when it closed that distance were not survivable. Strip away the fur. Strip away the muscle. Look at what the bones do. A gray wolf, 80 pounds of sinew and survival instinct, is caught mid-stride. The jaws of the cruel panther close around the upper hind leg. What happens next takes less than a second, but inside that second, the engineering is precise. The four canines, those carbon steel points, do not puncture. They converge. The 1,800 PSI of force channels through the mandible into a focal plane smaller than a human palm. The wolf's femur, the strongest bone in its body, does not crack. It severs. A clean mechanical failure, the way a steel beam snaps when the load exceeds its tolerance. And beneath the paw, for retractable claws each driven by internal tendon systems tensioning like hydraulic cables, deploy into frozen hide and lock. Grip. Anchor. The prey does not slide. It solved every problem the Pleistocene threw at it. Every ice age. Every trap. Every rival. But the Pleistocene was not just a test of intelligence. It was a siege. And even the cruel panther had to survive somewhere. The ice sheets did not arrive. They accumulated. Millions of tons of frozen water pressing down on the continent with the patience of geology, deforming the earth beneath them, grinding mountains into gravel, pushing entire ecosystems south into shrinking corridors of survivable land. That pressure, not metaphorical, but literal, tectonic, measurable, defined the world the cruel panther was born into. The cold was not seasonal. It was structural. Sub-zero temperatures persisted for months without relief, and the organism's response was engineered into its skin, a double-layer fur system functioning as thermal insulation shielding. The outer guard hairs deflected wind and moisture like armored plating. Beneath them, a dense-knit thermal core trapped body heat against the skin. This dual-stage system did not exist because the cold was uncomfortable. It existed because the cold killed. Without it, the blood of lesser organisms crystallized in the veins. The land itself became a weapon. And then the light failed. At high latitudes during glacial maxima, daylight contracted to a few pale hours. The world did not go dark the way a room goes dark when you switch off a lamp. It went dark the way a mine shaft goes dark, total, structural, without promise of return. Shadows did not lengthen. They became the default state. And in that permanent twilight, the cruel panther's low-light retinas activated like surveillance cameras switching to infrared. It did not fear the dark. The dark was where it worked. Through that darkness, sound carried. The low-frequency rumble of bison herds shifting across the permafrost, vibrations propagating through frozen ground faster than through open air. The American lion tracked those vibrations the way a submarine tracks sonar pings, building an acoustic map of a world it could not always see. 340,000 years. That is how long this species endured. Before the pyramids. Before agriculture. Before the first human scratched the first symbol onto the first cave wall, the cruel panther was perfected. It evolved from cave lion populations trapped south of the ice sheets, populations the glaciers cut off from the rest of their kind. The ice did not just test this creature. The ice created it. Forged it in isolation the way pressure forges carbon into diamond. Its rival, the saber-toothed Smilodon, had collapsed under the weight of its own specialization, those fragile, elongated canines snapping on the bones of prey that grew scarcer by the century. The cruel panther watched that lineage fail. And it adapted. Every single time. Until the last glacial cycle brought something new. A variable that did not obey the rules of ice and bone. And for the first time in 340 millennia, the cruel panther had no answer. We measure intelligence by survival. By who is left standing when the dust clears. By that metric, humans are the geniuses and everything that went extinct was not smart enough. But that metric is a lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. The American lion did not lack intelligence. It possessed a form of cognitive mapping so advanced that it could assess risk across a landscape, filtering threat from opportunity in a world designed to kill anything that guessed wrong. The dire wolves guessed wrong 4,000 times. The Smilodon guessed wrong hundreds of times. The cruel panther almost never guessed wrong. It did not fall because it was stupid. It fell because intelligence calibrated to ice and bone and tar has no defense against a species that rewrites the rules. Humans did not outrun the American lion. They did not outfight it. They burned its habitat. They drove its prey to collapse. They killed it the way a corporation kills a competitor, not in combat, but through infrastructure. Through attrition. Through the slow, indifferent machinery of expansion. And when it was done, when the largest, most perceptive, most tactically gifted feline the planet had ever produced was gone, they did not mount its skull in a place of honor. They did not carve its likeness into stone. They threw its bones in a trash heap. The archaeological record is clear. American lion remains found at human-adjacent sites were discarded among refuse. Food waste. Broken tools. The biological equivalent of a dismantled engine tossed into a landfill. Not preserved. Not revered. Discarded with the indifference of a species that did not understand what it had just erased. Panthera atrox. The cruel panther. But the cruel panther was not the one being cruel. The cruelty belonged to the indifference, the quiet, structural indifference of a species that reduces everything it touches to resource or refuse. The greatest hunter in the history of terrestrial life, processed into paleolithic garbage by creatures who would not grasp what they had destroyed for another 12,000 years. We call ourselves the pinnacle. The endpoint. The unchallenged design at the top of the chain. We build that certainty on the fact that we are still here and the cruel panther is not. But the cruel panther was still here for 340,000 years. It solved every trap. Read every threat. Survived every extinction the planet engineered to stop it. If even that was not enough, if even perfect senses and unmatched power and intelligence sharp enough to see through nature's oldest traps still ended in a trash heap, what makes us believe our own design is permanent?